So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar series organized by the MEP Interest Group on Antimicrobial Resistance. My name is Zoltán Masai-Kosubek. I work for the European Public Health Alliance, and I will be the moderator of this meeting. The European Public Health Alliance, or shortly EPvsAMR, is co-hosting the Secretariat of the MEP Interest Group on AMR with the support of the AMR Stakeholder Network, the largest civil society-led network of the AMR stakeholders in Europe. And we are doing this with Healthcare Without Harm Europe, who is the other organization providing the Secretariat services for the MEP Interest Group. The MEP Interest Group, which was launched in February 2020, is the only AMR dedicated group in the European Parliament. It brings together 17 MEPs from across the political spectrum who are working together to make Europe a global leader in the fight against AMR. You can follow the developments of this group on its website and also on Twitter using the hashtag MEPvsAMR. As we are heading to 18th of November, the European Antibiotic Awareness Day, the MEP Interest Group has been organizing a series of 3 webinars to raise awareness on the need for action and find evidence-informed policy solutions to this urgent threat to human, animal, and environmental health. Building on the webinar hosted on Friday last week by MEP Nicole Stefanauta, who is the Vice Chair of the MEP Interest Group, which meeting examined the environmental dimension of AMR. We will hold a discussion today under the auspices of Sarah Wiener, MEP, who is the chair of the group, and we will discuss the dependence of the EU food systems on antimicrobials. The event will be around the following key questions. How can the farm to fork strategy and the common agricultural policy help the EU to move forwards to a food system that is less dependent on the use of antimicrobials? What can be done to encourage the uptake of good practices from the veterinary field to ensure compliance with the new EU regulations on veterinary medicines and medicated feed? How can the EU protect people living in Europe from the exposure and spread of AMR through third country imports of animal products, while ensuring European farmers do not face unfair competition from animal foods produced to lower antibiotic use standards? Unfortunately, despite her willingness, MEP Sarah Wiener could not present this morning. Although she wanted to speak, she has been tested positive for COVID-19, and her health conditions did not make possible for her to speak today. We are really sorry about that, and we hope that she will be better soon. However, for this imparted discussion, her assistant, Vivian Vosman, kindly agreed to read her introductory remarks on her behalf. With that, Vivian, I would like to give the floor to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Zoltán. So firstly, of course, my name is Vivian, as Zoltán just mentioned, and I would like to thank everyone for taking part in this webinar today, also on behalf of Sarah Wiener, MEP, because AMR is a very important topic, and also for Sarah, who, as the chair of the AMR Interest Group, of course, very much cares about it. And as Zoltán also already said, Sarah really deeply regrets that she cannot be here with us today due to her ongoing recovery from COVID-19. But on her behalf, as chair of the Interest Group, I would really briefly just to say a few introductory words then before Zoltán moves on to introducing the speakers. Because this year, COVID-19 and the pandemic has clearly highlighted the central role that health plays in all aspects of our societies. And in that context, a reinvigorated effort is being developed, focusing on fighting antimicrobial resistance. Antibiotics, after all, are vital medicines in the treatment of bacterial infections. Without them, common infections that we can treat today would all of a sudden then become fatal tomorrow. Treatments such as chemotherapy, major surgery, or organ transplantation would put patients at far higher risk than they do today. But the effectiveness of antibiotics is under threat by the development of and spread of drug-resistant bacteria, as I'm sure you're all aware. So antimicrobial resistance, or AMR as we call it, is now a key cross-border health threat for Europe and the world. In Europe alone, AMR causes the death of 33,000 people annually and costs 1.5 billion euros in terms of healthcare costs and productivity losses. Overall, 70% of antibiotics globally are currently used for animals, And global antimicrobial consumption in the animal farming sector was actually expected to increase by 67% in the period from 2010 to 2030, according to UN Environment. So there is a clear link here between the development of AMR and animal farming and agriculture. In the EU, the two veterinary medicines and medicated feed regulations will come into force in January 2022. They restrict, among others, the use of antibiotics in preventative treatment and will phase in the requirement to collect use data for all animal species. So we are already taking steps in the right direction here. In addition, the Farm to Fork strategy, which Sarabina incidentally shadows in the ENVI committee, includes a target to reduce the sales of antimicrobials for farm animals and in aquaculture by 50% by 2030. And the Common Agricultural Policy will, of course, also shape incentives in the agricultural sector for the years to come. In that context, policy debates on the current dependency of EU food systems on the use of antimicrobials and the production of standards and the protection of standards for European consumers and producers in the face of lower quality imports are increasingly gaining importance and visibility in the public sphere. So a science-based establishment of maximum residue limits for veterinary medicinal products to protect consumers, banning the use of reserve antibiotics in animal farming, the development of safe and efficient veterinary medicinal products, and medicated feed are among key topics that are deeply intertwined with the strategies on AMR from our perspective. And with those few introductory words on behalf of Sarah, I would like to pass the floor back to Zoltan and thank you all again for taking part in the webinar. And I'm also looking forward to an interesting discussion.
Thank you very much, Vivian, for that. And thanks for sharing with us MEPvsAMR's thoughts. This introduction was accurate and very relevant to the topic and the political context around, which gives a useful overview for the upcoming discussion. And again, I would like to take this opportunity to wish her a swift recovery. So with that note, I'm delighted to welcome to our four speakers who will speak about the mentioned aspects in further detail. So please I'm speaking to the panel members, so please turn on your cameras. And the first speaker will be Ms. Sabine Jülicher, who is Director for Food and Feed Safety Innovation in the Directorate General for Health and Food Safety, DG Sante, at the European Commission. She is responsible for many policies relating to a range of sectors such as food information, composition, food waste, food processing, technologies, novel foods, biotechnology, pesticide, biocides, veterinary medicines, and animal nutrition, as well as the Farm to Fork strategy and the European Green Deal, and those are quite relevant for AMR. Rens van Dobbenborg is the director of the Federation of Veterinarians of Europe, FVE, representing over 300 veterinarians across all Europe, and one of the largest and most influential veterinary professional organizations in the world. A veteran with decades of experience, Rens has long worked on the EU food system and AMR. Keith Thompson is also a member of the panel, who is Chief Veterinary Officer and leader of the Animal Health Program at the FAO, and the director of the Joint Center for Zoonosis and Antimicrobial Resistance. He has more than 30 years of experience in working on disease ecology, the interaction of wildlife, domestic, and the environment. Please note that from the FAO side, Dr. Henrik-Jan Ommel is also with us, who would be happy to answer any question addressed to FAO and who will join the panel during the question and answer session. And last but not least, we have Kate Blaszak. Kate is head of research and animal welfare at the World Animal Protection, one of the world's leading animal welfare organizations that operates in over 50 countries, as well as at global level, thanks to its United Nations consultative status. Thanks for all of you being with us today. And now we can move to the presentation part of our session. So I'm turning to our four speakers who have been invited to give short introductory remarks. And these will be followed by an interactive discussions during which we will take questions from the audience. We have limitations because this is a webinar, but despite that, we would like to make that session as interactive as possible. So you can use the chat box functions to engage with our speaker and ask your question. Please identify who you are and to whom the question is addressed so that we can make sure to get back to them later on. Please do not forget also to engage on Twitter with the hashtag of the MEP Interest Group on AMR, MEPvsAMR. Finally, we would like to let you know that the webinar is being recorded and that the recording will be sent to you by email and published on the website of the MEP Interest Group in the next few days. So with that, it is my pleasure to turn to Sabine from the European Commission. Sabine, first of all, many thanks again for making you available for this important discussion. As you are leading the European Commission services dealing with many aspects relevant for AMR, I'm wondering how is the farm to fork strategy of the European Green Deal is connected with AMR. So you can unmute yourself and we are listening to you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Zoltan, for the introduction. Good morning to everyone. And I must say, I'm really happy to be here today to discuss with you how we better fight AMR. It's a very timely discussion. Health is very much in the foreground. And as Vivian already said in her statement, you know, we have, even in Europe, a quite considerable death toll as a consequence of infection due to bacteria resistant to antibiotics. I mean, more than 30,000 people, just to put that into perspective, you know, this is comparable to the total number of passengers of more than 100 medium-sized aeroplanes. So imagine what we would be thinking, you know, if basically every week we had casualties of 2 planes in Europe. So the discussion would be much more in the foreground. As far as the Commission is concerned, AMR is a priority for this Commission and has also been a priority for several years. We had an action plan already from 2011. We have since 2017 the EU One Health Action Plan against AMR with quite a number of specific dedicated actions that all in all we anticipate will make a change, and they do make a change. Actually, we already started in 2006 when the EU banned the use of antibiotics as growth promoter in medicated feed. And there we took out one major contributor to what we call the non-prudent use of antimicrobials. So this is already many years ago, and since then we have been moving on. We have been improving our data. We have been improving our knowledge, in particular on the side of understanding the sales and the use of antimicrobials in the farming context. Everybody slightly interested in the topic will know the European Surveillance of Veterinary Antimicrobial Consumption, the ESVAC project. This is now celebrating its 10th anniversary, and the Commission has launched that together with the European Medicines Agency. And I'm really glad to say that on the basis of the last ESVAC report, we are able to quantify that European countries reduce the use of antibiotics in animals. In the time scale between 2011 and 2018, this sales dropped by more than 34%, so one-third reduction. So in addition to this absolute reduction, we could also see that certain veterinary antimicrobial agents, which are critically important in human medicines, also noticeably decreased, sometimes up to 70%, and we can discuss that later. So there has been progress, but definitely more remains to be done, and we are really even more determined now than ever to significantly continue reducing the use of antimicrobials in food-producing animals. And Zoltan, you spoke about the farm-to-fork strategy, which is really going into various action strands, various activities to develop a more sustainable food system. And antimicrobial resistance and the combat thereof has really been taken up as one important action line. And we have set ourselves in Europe the target of reducing the overall EU sales of antimicrobials for farmed animals and in aquaculture by 50% in 2030. So that is 10 years from now, and a further reduction by 50% in volume. That is ambitious. We think it's realistic, and it requires really, further effort. And further efforts have already been codified in the EU by what we call the new regulations on veterinary products, veterinary medicinal products, and medicated feed. They will kick in beginning of 2022, and they will introduce quite a number of measures that will promote the prudent use of antibiotics, and we will also have mandatory data collections on sales of and use of antimicrobials in animals. I just want to point out a couple of measures. So we are codifying the total ban of the use of antimicrobials for growth promotions, no matter what the form is. There will be a near total ban of preventive use of antimicrobials. We will be designating certain antimicrobials as reserved for human use, and the use in animals will not be possible anymore. And in this context, we are also seeing, and the context is wider than just these legislations, is that AMR is not respecting borders. It's a global issue, and we have already heard the numbers. We're expecting, actually, contrary to all our efforts, that globally the sales and the consumption of antimicrobials will rise. So also in this context, we are going to introduce a couple of measures that are relevant on a global scale, and I hope to discuss them also later. But really, three main points. Things have been achieved. Still, we are by far not there where we should be, even in Europe. Work has really to continue on the reduction of non-prudent use of antimicrobial resistance. The situation has to be monitored. We have to still expand our database and our knowledge base, and we have to expand on research. And also, very, very importantly, we need a strong global initiative on AMR, because this is not a European issue only, just the opposite, it's a global issue. And with that, I would like to pause, and I'm looking forward to further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabine, for sharing your thoughts. That indeed, AMR is a global threat. So let's see then what kind of solutions can we identify during these sessions. And also just taking this an opportunity to remind participants that you can use the chat box to post question to Sabine. And that brings us to the next speaker. And this is my honor to turn to Rens van den Berg. As another essential aspect of the dependence on the EU food system on AMR comes from the animal health and veterinary experts. And as you represent the Federation of Veterinarians in Europe here, I am sure there are many aspects you can comment on the previous points, and also your members certainly have some inputs to share. Rens, as you have the floor now, the floor is yours. You can unmute yourself, and then we will display your presentation. So I'm just asking my colleague to share his screen, and then we can go ahead.
Great, thank you, Sultan. First, I'd like to thank the MEP Interest Group on AMR, as well as Sultan yourself on behalf of EPHA, for the invitation to participate in this important online discussion on behalf of FE. Next slide, please. For those who may be not familiar with FE, the Federation of Veterinarians of Europe, we are the umbrella organization of veterinary statutory bodies and associations across Europe, EU and non-EU, 48 organizations from 39 countries. And FVE covers all veterinary disciplines. So it's the practitioners, state veterinary officers, hygienists, education, research, and colleagues active in industry. In total, as you stated already, Zoltan, over 300,000 veterinary colleagues. Next slide, please. Our mission is to enhance animal health, animal welfare, and public health, and protect the environment, and to enable veterinarians to deliver their services to society, as well as on the same moment, the society that acknowledge these services provided by veterinarians. And maybe no need to say, but One Health and sustainability are key objectives for FE since a long, long time. Next slide, please. FE welcomes the Farm to Fork strategy as launched by the Commission, being part of the Green Deal. FE, of course, is happy to cooperate with all stakeholders involved to make this strategy a success. At the same moment, we also have some questions. Reduction of veterinary antibiotic consumption, in our opinion, is not a goal as such. Reducing antimicrobial resistance is the aim. Responsible use is the way to achieve. Next slide, please. Having said that, according to the most recent SFAC report, as Mrs. Juliker also said, shows from 2011 to 2018, we reduced the veterinary antibiotic consumption with almost 35%, with a strong emphasis on the critical important antibiotics. And we think critical important antibiotics should stay critical, but not being placed on a ban list reserved for humans, because in principle, an animal which has a disease caused by bacteria should have the possibility to be treated by the appropriate product. And this is for the sake of animal health and animal welfare. But if you look to transmission, also for the sake of public health. So we are against banning certain antibiotics. Next slide, please. So what should the Farm to Fork strategy bring us? And of course, there's the need to enforce the One Health concept. The notion that health of animals, people, and ecosystems are interconnected. It must be targeted to minimizing, or as possible, if possible, eliminating AMR. It has to enhance animal welfare, more and more important. And last but not least, it has to ensure sustainability in order to ensure affordable food. Next slide, please. And here you see an infographic which was created by FEE to communicate to the outer world and also veterinarians to see what is important in changes regarding the VMP regulation as well as the medicated feed regulation. For example, antibiotics always on veterinary prescription, no preventative use of antibiotics, and collecting user data instead of sales, and a lot more. Next slide, please. YPRUMA, European Platform on Responsible Use of Medicines in Animals. Members are veterinary organizations, animal health industry, so pharmaceutical industry, farmers, feed industry, etc. Identifies and shares and promotes best practices regarding responsible use of medicines in animals, including antibiotics. And we do this already since 2005. Next slide. And of course, make the world aware. We communicate. Next slide. Some of the organizations FEE collaborating with in the field of fighting AMR. I think maybe needless to say, but it's an important topic for the European veterinary profession, and we consider ourselves as a part of the solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rens, for these points. It was quite insightful intervention, and as you said, the ultimate target is reducing AMR, and the way how to get there is obviously an interesting question, and this is why also we are here. And I'm sure that those aspects you have just presented will give food for thought for the upcoming discussion as well. I'm happy to see that some questions are already emerging, so please get engaged. We will note all of them, and we try to bring them to the discussion as much as we can. And then just another reminder, if you are on social media, on Twitter, you can tweet the outcomes of the discussion, so it can also reach the wider audience outside of the virtual walls of this room, always using the hashtag MEPvsAMR. With that note, it is my pleasure to hand over to Keith Sumption, representing FAO here. As it was said already in the previous presentation, that AMR is not only a national or European, but a global health challenge. I am sure from the FAO side, you have relevant points to share with us on linking those various levels. Keith, the floor is yours. So you can unmute yourself, and please feel free to share your screen so that we can see your presentation as well.
Hey, thank you very much indeed, and really welcome this opportunity to speak. I'll make it brief because I think the discussion is going to be very useful. So firstly, just to remind people that the upcoming World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, and I think this is an excellent way of bringing awareness in this area, and the theme is AMR is here and now, united to strengthen food systems and secure livelihoods. So firstly, what are FAO's goals and vision on AMR? And there are really two goals. That is to reduce AMR levels and slow the emergence and spread of resistance relating to the food chain and for all food and agriculture sectors that we have responsibility. And second, preserve the ability to treat infections. So just to remind you of who we are, FAO has 194 members. Its headquarters in Rome. And it has regional offices around the world, and it has 130 country offices. So that brings an opportunity to really assist countries to establish their national action plans on AMR. And secondly, just to remind people that the main goal of FAO in terms of sustainable development goals is food security and eliminating hunger. And the health status for animals and for livestock and aquaculture around the world is vastly different from that of Europe. So the context of use of antimicrobials is important. If we're going to shift away from their use in treating infections, we have to stop those infections to start with. So firstly, what are the sectors that food and agriculture relates to with AMR? Well, they are many, from antimicrobial use in food, it's already been mentioned, but in plant production as well, fisheries, aquaculture, environment, and all of those sides come into what FAO does. And one example is how antimicrobials and antimicrobial resistance is also a water safety issue, and water is something that is important for all life, from life underwater as well as production systems above ground. And so all these things have an interconnectedness. So FAO's guidance really is in those three main areas: terrestrial animal production systems, aquatic animal production systems, and in crop production and health. So we have to work on all of those areas in our new action plan for the next 4 years. And just to say, this action plan for the next 4 years really connects to the global action plan agreed with the tripartite, that is with WHO and OIE, and it has really 5 outcomes we're focusing on: stakeholder awareness, surveillance and research, good practices, responsible use, and strengthening governance. Those are all significant areas. So at national level, what we have to assist countries is a pathway, a management pathway that they can use to be able to assess their own level in these areas that are important for the outcomes that matter. And that's a useful tool to be applied and is applied through FAO's programs. Surveillance for AMR is one of the areas we work on together with, in a coordinated way with OIE and with WHO, focusing on countries' abilities for surveillance on AMR. The development of texts for guidance is something that's been significant through the last 5 years to actually assist countries. And maybe most significant for this group is an ongoing consultation that we have relating to AMR legislation. So FAO has a legal service that assists countries in development and have developed methodologies to analyze AMR-related legislation. It's been piloted and tested in 22 countries. It's available in multiple languages. So at the moment, there is a public review that's out looking for responses to the methodology to be used. So as part of the tripartite, FAO focuses its lead on this side of legislation and the ability to improve that. So finally, global coordination, I'll bring up. There's been an increasing level of global interest, and that's right, on AMR. And perhaps what's most significant in this current year and this week is the establishment of a global leaders group on AMR. So this is between the three tripartite organizations. This global leaders group will be announced on Friday. And we are very thrilled as an organization that there's been an extremely high level of interest to become and serve on that global leaders group, from serving ministers and in some cases prime ministers as well. So there'll be a high level international attention in which there's a balance between animal health, environment and human health in the global leaders group. So thank you very much for your attention and this opportunity.
Thank you very much for you, Keith, to sharing your thoughts and contributing to the discussion. It was quite helpful also to remind that it is not only the European but also the World Antibiotic Awareness Week. So that puts a high context, and seeing the FAO's action, I think that's already quite a useful context, and would be helpful to the discussion, which also brings me to the reminder that if you have questions to the previous speakers or the FAO, please use the chat function. And again, a reminder that Dr. Hendrik Jan Ommel will be with us at that session, so that he will be available for the answer. And last but not least, it is my honor to turn to our next speaker, who is Kate Blaszak from the World Animal Protection. Kate, as you are working for an organization which takes care about research and animal welfare a lot, could you outline for us the work done by the World Animal Protections to support a more sustainable agriculture, and share your thoughts on what could be done at EU level to tackle AMR? So you can unmute yourself, and I would like to ask you to share your presentation, and then the floor is yours. Thank you in advance.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see it now. Hello, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to speak. First of all, our mission is to move the world to improve animals' lives. We have a range of offices around the world, as you will see, and though also the map is also about emphasising that the impact of AMR is also on the low and middle income countries around the world. We also liaise with a range of global stakeholders on this topic: the Antibiotics Resistance Coalition, led by Johns Hopkins University, REACT, consumer bodies, the Alliance to Save Our Antibiotics, and others. The map also reminds us that, of course, the EU imports products, for example, chicken from Brazil and Thailand and others, and also exports. So, of course, as others have said, this is a global issue. And globally, 75% of antimicrobials are used in farm animals. And annually, around 50 billion farm animals are factory farmed. 7 billion are raised in the EU. And while banned in the EU, antibiotics are still used to promote growth globally. Routine group prophylaxis is another key overuse of antibiotics, given to herds of animals when there is no disease and no confirmed infection, so healthy animals. So for chickens, pigs, fish, dairy and beef, cattle, antibiotics are provided to the whole group in water or feed. Antibiotics used to prop up low welfare systems of cages, overcrowding, mutilations, intensive breeding for fast growth, early weaning, deprived natural behaviours of these animals. And up to 80% of those antibiotics are fed to livestock are excreted, and up to 75% of those antibiotics used in aquaculture may be lost into the surrounding environment. And increasing temperature, climate change and pollution will accelerate and compound the development of AMR. And while the link between overuse of antibiotics and development of superbugs from farm animals is well established on farms, contaminating the food chain and environment, our third and current report, Fueling the Pandemic Crisis, highlights the link between antibiotic overuse and enabling the zoonotic pandemics like bird flu, swine flu. And it notes that during this COVID-19 pandemic, up to 90% of critical or hospitalised patients in some reports were treated with antibiotics, the very same antibiotics that are still given to healthy farm animals for disease prevention. So in short, the overuse of antibiotics in farm animals not only can contribute to, but also exacerbate the public health burden of pandemics. We commissioned a global poll by Flood and Partners in August of this year across 15 countries involving over 15,000 people. Some of the figures or results from Europe countries include 85% of people significantly underestimate the amount of antibiotics that go to farm animals. 9 in 10 think antibiotics should only be used in farm animals that are sick. 87% are concerned about the possibility of superbugs coming from farm animals, and almost 80% are concerned about the possibility of a pandemic originating from farm animals. 7 in 10 feel that the treatment of farm animals is unsustainable for our health and the health of the planet. And what most people think governments should do is monitor and report on the use of antibiotics in farm animals, monitor and report on pollution from farms, increase the minimum welfare laws for farm animals, and restrict the use of antibiotics in farm animals. Our report highlights that reduced antibiotic use in food-producing animals is associated with 24% lower antibiotic-resistant bacteria in people. So it does lead to reduced AMR. And to successfully restrict the use of antibiotics, you do need to address the underlying welfare issues of, for example, overcrowding, barren environments, fast growth genetics, as shown here in the sort of conventional, typical EU factory farming of chickens. If not, the underlying problems persist, as over 500 vets and producers within the US, in the Raised Without Antibiotic schemes for chicken have reported, and they report animal welfare problems and concerns that mislead consumers. But the EU has shown it can lead the way with welfare as part of the solution. And Wageningen University reported on this graphic here, which highlights that slower growth genetics that were used in the domestic retail chicken industry was a key part of further reducing the national antibiotic use targets to meet the Dutch targets for antibiotic use. And similarly for pigs, Sweden has led with regulating a true minimum weaning age for piglets, and Finland has also phased out tail docking, and there are many other examples. EU directives for these animal welfare measures must follow. It can't just be left up to industry. Voluntary approaches to date have not worked. So finally, given an overwhelming majority, 94% of European citizens believe that it is important to protect the welfare of farmed animals, there are various EU instruments towards a food system less dependent on antibiotics. As previously mentioned, we look forward to the full enforcement of the pending EU directives in 2022, where there are actually, we would advocate equivalent rules for imports. So prophylactic use should be banned on imported products, not just growth promotion use. And at least this could be applied for pending free trade agreements. And how will this be implemented, we ask? The farm to fork strategy is fantastic in outlook, but how will it be implemented beyond the regulations? And we welcome the Green Alliance for the food systems and the proposal for bilateral multilateral, for example, with the UN perhaps. The CAP policy is of course key. The provisions for the veterinary medicines and the medicated feed regulations must be on the conditionality list for CAP funding, because as we know, CAP must move away from funding intensive farming as the biggest user of antibiotics and move towards payments instead to Pillar 1 eco schemes that cover more environmentally, societally beneficial approaches to farming that also integrate animal welfare and reduce AMR, and then make Pillar 2 animal welfare measures mandatory for all species as key to AMR prevention. So finally, I leave you with an example that we actually visited last year in the Netherlands, the Winstrik broiler farm, which incorporates a number of these measures, is not only energy neutral, but ultimately produces chickens with 98% not needing any antibiotics, high welfare, and basically a high sustainability approach to farming chickens. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Kate, for that, and then reminding us to those aspects, and also that the pragmatic approach and examples you have just shared, and that also a nice way to warm up ourselves to the next part of the discussion. As we are moving ahead of time, please take this as also an opportunity to put your questions in the chat box, because either to Kate or previous speakers, because the opportunity to answer them is now. And with that, I would like to thank you very much to all of our panel members that you shared your presentations, and we will move to the question and answer session. And at this stage, I would like to also ask Dr. Henrik Jan Ommer from FAO that to join the panel, and you can also turn on your camera. And with that, let's move to the questions. Actually, there are quite a few of them. Just to mention that there is a questions about asking teaching resources and teaching materials for undergraduates. So in that sense, the outcomes of the discussion will be relevant. But as Sabine started the discussions, there is a few questions addressed to her. So maybe let me put them to you first. One question reads as follows. As Ms. Jülicher mentioned, that antimicrobial use went down partly, but in contrary, AMR and also AMR against CIA, highest priority for humans, antimicrobials are not going down in the same rate, or partly not at all. What is the Commission's plan to the 5 antimicrobials defined by the WHO as SIEHP? There is also another aspect here. There was a comment mentioning that there is a missing approach to reducing antibiotic usage in a responsible way, that animal health and welfare must not be compromised when making a reduction. So maybe if you can address that first, and then we can move to the other questions. Ms. Sabine?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I mean, what I think is very important is, you know, in all these approaches, that it is, as was already said by Renz, reduction of use of antimicrobials is not a goal in itself. What we really want to do is the reduction of antimicrobial resistance. And what we really need to foster here is what we call prudent use. So the non-responsible, non-prudent use has to stop. And I think here we have a target for a global level discussion, what constitutes prudent use, or on the other hand, what constitutes non-prudent use. And there is a very good global convergence that you know, use of antimicrobials for growth promotion purposes is not prudent use. It is not exactly true that the antimicrobial resistance is that we are not seeing positive trends. We are also fostering the monitoring of foodborne bacteria that we find in animals and food. And actually here the indicator to susceptibility to antimicrobials has improved over the last couple of years. So we do see signs of improvements. Whether we see signs of improvement in the human population is probably not as easy to tell, because it is a multifactorial issue. I mean, we are here focusing on basically the contribution of animal farming and non-prudent use in that context to the topic. But I think it is not without, certain glimmers of light and hope that the policies are showing effect. I think one of the very important measures for the future will be the reservation of certain antimicrobials for human use only. I heard very much what Ren said. He doesn't prefer a ban. We are establishing currently criteria by which we will designate these antimicrobials. And indeed, a good animal health status is a very good contributor to less use of antimicrobials. But this designation, which will result in a ban for certain antimicrobials, will be really important, because in the end, human health trumps over animal health. I'm afraid to say that in this clarity. Maybe last point from my side, our strategies, amongst others, Farm to Fork, they are comprehensive. They see the necessity of good animal health. They see the necessity of more animal welfare. They announce measures in that direction. And the Common Agricultural Policy, as we conceived it, will also allow member states to move with many measures and finance many measures in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much for elaborating on those aspects. Then let's move to the next questions. It is from Claire Richaud. It reads like this: new technologies, animal health monitoring tools, for instance, are already existing to reduce AMR on farms, yet we do not find much incentive to allow farmers to adopt such tools. Why? And I'm wondering, obviously, that questions could be relevant for many speakers, but maybe Rens, you would like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, thank you, Sultan. I think this is a very important question, because yes, there is a lack of incentives for farmers to adopt these low antibiotic or non-antibiotic strategies. And of course, there should be incentives for these farmers. And one of the most important things to start with is that to be sure that there is a level playing field. So that means reciprocity is the first thing we need if we want to, let's say, protect or to encourage these European farmers. If we require certain points from our European farmers, we also should do that with, let's say, importing animals or animal by products. On top of that, of course, there's also the possibility of other incentives, but let's say they are more from the retail/consumer side, which has to acknowledge this antibiotic low programs in food or food originating from animals. So I think it's important. First step is to safeguard reciprocity. Second is to find incentives in the market.
Thanks for mentioning that, Rens. Now I'm moving to the next questions, which is quite direct to FAO, as we reach to the global dimension. So the question is Africa, and more specifically Uganda, catered in the program you have just mentioned?
Thank you. I can comment on that one. Well, there's a significant work in all of Africa relating to the development of national action plans for AMR. There is a different, there's an international coordination amongst parties who are supporting countries. There's a multi-partner trust fund that operates in this sense. So there's coordination between different donors as to which country is supported by whom and under which mechanism. But Uganda is certainly one of the countries that is important as part of the African countries. So yes, we're very interested to support. I can't tell you exactly what's going on at the moment.
This sounds quite reassuring. Thanks for that answer. And the next question is, I can see addressed to Kate actually, by Marcon Tigers, reads as follows. It often seems that there is a mismatch between what consumers say they want and what they do. How can the desire for increased welfare turn into action when it comes to purchases made in the supermarket, when higher welfare products are usually more expensive?
Thank you for that. That's a good question. I can provide an example. One of the best examples is really the Netherlands, where retailers eventually came together on chicken, for domestic retail chicken. And actually, they decided collectively, again, for a level playing field, to raise the welfare standards for domestic chicken for supermarkets. And that also related to fast food production as well. And so what they did is, in the end, did that, agreed to collectively raise the standards for chicken welfare and remove the lowest levels of welfare, so that ultimately consumers were prepared and willing to pay for an increase in welfare standards for chicken across the board. So the best example is the Netherlands. And also, as I demonstrated in the presentation, there were gains, obviously, in reducing antibiotic need and use. So I think that's a clear example of a win-win. So I think it's collectively when the industry comes together, and this was in response to collective consumer and public pressure, I might add, but it was a very successful example. And if that then translates into the export sector as well, that would have greater benefits for the wider public and also being translated into other sectors. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kate, for that. I would like to back to Sabine again, because there were aspects on incentives and global trade, which certainly she, from the Commission, could say a few words. And also that brings me another question to address to her from Susie Schindler, saying, alongside the target to reduce antibiotic use by 50% by 2030, are there any targets for reducing the consumption of meat? Is the EU anticipating producing the same amount of meat with less antibiotics or less meat overall? Sabine, the floor is yours.
Thank you for these lovely complex questions. I think we have to acknowledge, I spoke to you about the ESVAG report and the data we have there. We have to acknowledge that in many member states, the farming community and the veterinary community have already reached amazing results. I mean, in past years, I spoke about 34% reduction. Some member states reduced by more than half. What we have to keep in mind is that between member states, there is a difference of 200-fold use of antibiotics, not absolute, but in corrected figures. So we can see that for some of our member states, for some of our farming communities, for some of our filières, there is a huge scope for more prudent use. And all of this, what has been achieved until now, was without any, direct financial incentives, if I may say so. There were incentives maybe through retail chains. There were incentives maybe through consumer programs. What the Commission has now proposed is that the incentives of the Common Agricultural Policy will also be much more usable for member states' programs to support those farmers that move in the direction of less antibiotic use, for example, by helping them to improve biosecurity, by helping them to improve housing conditions, and so on and so forth. So it is a whole bunch of incentives, but what I'm saying, a lot has been possible already, really by carefully looking at the situation and by drawing up individual action plans on farm level, and obviously by the support and the invaluable support of the farming, of the veterinary community to help in giving advice in that direction. Now, level playing field, import-export. Europe is a huge trader importing, exporting. The veterinary medicines regulation that I spoke about has also some effect and some provisions in addition to those that I mentioned that are applicable to imports from third countries. So the requirements that we would like third country operators to comply for the part of the production they wish to export to Europe is the obligation not to use antimicrobials for growth promotion, because that's simply not prudent, and also the obligation not to use those antimicrobials that are reserved for humans in their production for the EU. So this is a certain beginning, this is a certain ask to those wishing to import or export to the EU and import their produce into the EU market. Thank you very much for the question on the overall meat consumption. Our strategy here is quite clear. We would like the EU population to adopt healthier diets. And indeed, many of the diets that our population in the EU has is too rich in meat. And we are clearly wishing also to review our policies to move into more healthy diets, into more plant-based diets, and all in all, this should also result, if that is happening, in less meat consumption. So it's a bit of everything. It's the absolute use, it's cutting out the non-prudent use, and obviously also looking at meat consumption. Last word there, we have to realize also that Europe is the production place for a lot of meat being exported. So it is not only the demand that is generated within Europe, there is a lot of international demand for EU-produced meat protein, if I may say. So it's much more complex than sometimes we anticipate, but there can't be anything wrong if Europe for itself adopts the most prudent use of antimicrobials.
Thank you very much, Sabine, for that. And there was also a question by Christian Pletzer saying, commenting the EU strategy to support research or alternatives on antimicrobials. And I felt your question somehow, your answer also addressed that issue as well. I'm just looking at the timing, and we are closing. We are very close to the end. But I would like to, because there are still many interesting questions there, maybe I would like to take the opportunity to put forward you a question and asking the panel members to comment it, if possible, shortly within 30 minutes, sorry, 30 seconds. The question reads as follows from Edward Böckler, that would you agree that it is necessary to radically change the farming approach from needing to produce lots of food to making farms become healthy systems by respecting the interactions between animals, crops, and environment, which results in a production of highly nutritious, healthy food, CO2 absorption in the soil, welfare for animals and farmers, and elimination of the use of chemicals in farms? And that, of course, for this is to be possible, we have to ignore the lobby, learn from techniques who already achieved this, and not just try to improve what we are doing now. So it's, as you can see, it's quite a general aspect. So I don't know if you would like to comment this. And there is another one to all panels. How are local people, citizens, being active and involved in identifying, designing, and implementing interventions can make a positive change? If you can just comment those aspects in 30 seconds, that would be welcome. And Sabine, again, as you were the first, if you could start, that would be great.
Yeah, long questions, short answers. Yes, we need the engagement of local people. The CAP is supposed to have a more national, more local element. And the experience I have in my profession is that the farming community wants to produce more sustainably, wants to produce more environmentally friendly, and they need the support, the best possible support from the regulator, from the EU systems, but also from the consumer to do exactly that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabine. Rens?
Yeah, thank you, Sultan. Yeah, the first question is addressed to the animals. I think the second is to a lesser extent. Change, yes. Radically, no, I don't think so. We are the opinion as FV that we need all kinds of different ways of agriculture to be able to feed the global community in the future. So yes, we need to adapt to better systems where possible, in a speed of time where this is realistic to change, not radically, but we have to adopt to better systems where we can. Yes.
Thank you very much for that. I'm asking Keith and Henrik Jan Omel, if you would like to come in.
Ladies first, so I would say Kate first.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. World Animal Protection would advocate for a transformation of the food system, not only for animals, but for people and for planet. We actually see that there's, via an absolute reduction in meat consumption, there's actually a modelling to show that you can get a reduction in antimicrobial resistance directly by Van Berkel and others, 2017. But we also see that this is important for sustainability in the EU and elsewhere. And also we see that replacement partly by plant-based options, but also absolute reduction in meat consumption, but also via high welfare systems for animals, people and the planet. And that does involve engaging people and communities and consumers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then finally, from Feo.
Yes, thank you. And apologies on behalf of Keith Sampson, who had to leave for another webinar. My name is Henk Ormel. I'm a European citizen. I'm working at a global organization. And I would like to start by congratulating the European Union with the Farm to Fork strategy. I think this is very relevant, very important. But I would also like to say, with my European experience, I'm a veterinarian from the Netherlands, working now in the world. There will be a rise in the demand of animal proteins of 70% in the coming 20 years. This production will not take place in the European Union. It will take place in Sub-Saharan Africa, in South Asia. That is where the hotspot for AMR will lie. And this is also important for the European Union. So I would say, take your responsibility, and I know the European Union is doing this, fight it at the source. And the source is really elsewhere, also very important for the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And I can see actually quite a lot other questions, which is a very positive sign. So I think we are in the process of discussing a topic which is highly relevant. What I can tell you, obviously, we are not able to answer all of them because the webinar is closing to its end, but we captured them, and we will reflect further upon the issues raised. And as it was also raised by the comments, not only a reflection of the outcomes of the webinar, the recordings, but also the presentations of the speakers will be available. So in that sense, we can continue the joint reflections as we are indeed ahead of European Antibiotic Awareness Day and the World Antibiotic Awareness Week. With that, I would like to kindly inform you that the MEP Interest Group on AMR has launched an online awareness raising campaign on social media for the European Antibiotic Awareness Day. And this is one you can follow if you focus on the hashtag MEPvsAMR. I would like to thank again not only the excellent speakers, but also the participants that you joined today's discussions. As I said in the beginning, this is part of a series of webinars, and there is another webinar taking place tomorrow in the morning. So if you are interested, you can also attend that. That will be hosted by the Vice Chair of the MEP Interest Group, TMO Vulcan, and that will examine more the research and the development aspects of AMR. Having said that, again, thanks for all of you for being with us today, and I would like to wish you a very pleasant afternoon. Thank you very much.